Hi, I'm Courtney Loving. This is my cohort Katerina, Meredith, and Seiji, and we are currently in Dr. Baltimore's theory class. And just last week, Dr. Dan Rose came to visit and talk to us about psychodynamic and psychoanalytic theories. So we've been asked to kind of discuss our thoughts. So I'll kind of kick it off with asking you guys what really struck you as valuable during his conversation with us in terms of psychodynamics and psychoanalytic theories.
I'll go ahead and start off and say that I think psychodynamic theory is what a lot of us have probably been introduced to kind of superficially, just on the surface. Probably in undergrad, a lot of our professors introduced us to Freud and his theoretical approach and everything. But I feel like a lot of the emphasis was on how it's not kind of relevant anymore. Kind of seemed to be kind of a bias. You know, they all recognized, like how he pioneered psychodynamic theory and contributed a lot to psychology and psychiatry. But as far as the applicability to today or in the counseling world, it was really hard to see the connection. And I think Dan Rose, a lot of the points that he made really just showed how it is a really relevant theory. It can really be applied today in a real counseling session.
Well, and I know he and Dr. Baltimore both mentioned multiple times that it wasn't so much what the theory said, but it was the questions that Freud posed that were the most valuable to where we are today in terms of, what were the questions that he was asking.
Right, and for instance, I think one of the points you can talk about maybe more into detail about is, the unconscious and conscience and how that kind of applies to a lot of theories, but mostly in psychodynamic, psychoanalytic, how Dr. Rose gave us a really good example of how he brought in a little, toy of Godzilla and was giving us the relativity of the unconscious about how, the Japanese during World War II made this movie about, Godzilla, and how it actually, wasn't just about this scary creature, but it was something that was being unleashed through the Japanese, their subconscious level,
Right. It was some suppressed symptoms maybe of how they felt when they were bombed, and they came to surface in more of a productive way. I guess there's a good way and a bad way that your subconscious can bring up bad experiences in your life. And to me, this was a more creative, yes,
expression,
right? So, he also gave the example of his little boy when him and his wife, I guess, were going to a concert or something in Atlanta, and his little boy was very upset that they were going to be leaving him. The little boy thought he was probably getting, being abandoned or whatever, and so he gave his dad some stickers to put on him, and that was a good way for the boy to be defensive in the fact that it's a defense mechanism because he was, he felt abandoned, that his parents were going to be leaving. However, he adapted that to and transposed it, I guess, into the stickers and said, "I'm going to go with you, and this is how I'm going to go with you."
Kind of without saying any of that. It was just in those actions, by putting the sticker on his dad, he kind of could stay with him on the trip and feel like,
and it was a coping mechanism. Yes,
right.
It was a coping mechanism for him.
Right. I think that goes along with one of the central themes, I think, like the Godzilla story that Katarina mentioned, and also the story with Dan Rose's child and the stickers, is kind of showing just how we don't really have control over the world. And in order for us to cope with it, we kind of make our own creations. Every individual has their own way of coping with their world, and it's kind of the world that we create. And I think that's kind of just one of the central themes behind psychodynamic theory.
Along with creating, what we get out of the world kind of thing, is how we kind of tend to grab someone to come with us. Mm-hmm. And he was talking about a therapeutic alliance and how, the therapist is someone that's there for the client to be someone that can kind of have their foot in the stream, as he said, as Dan Rose said, foot in the stream and 1 foot on the bank, kind of experiencing getting a little wet of, what the client's talking about and what they're,
living.
Yeah.
That empathy,
Yeah.
being a part of the experience. He talked a lot about how you can't just kind of stand all the way on the bank. You have to be in there. You have to be feeling what they're feeling and sharing their experience so that they, so that part of it is productive and they feel important and validated and everything else. But then as the therapist, you've got to keep that other foot on the bank.
That sense of reality.
Yeah, and objectivity so that you can do the work and really provide them with what they need.
Yeah.
I like that too. What were you going to say, Sadie?
I think, didn't he mention somewhere about how it takes two to think, was it a disturbing thought or just
Tragic.
A tragic thought?
Yeah.
Or any
Trauma.
thought.
Traumatic.
Right.
Or any thought for that matter. And I think that was a somewhat profound sentence.
Well, yeah, he gave a very vivid explanation of that, in that I think it was one of his buddies who was experienced their mother dying.
Death,
yes. And they were not together. He had called him on his cell phone, and he took a picture of his mother dying, basically.
Video,
actually. It was a video. Dying, and, shared it with Dr. Rose. And, as a counselor, there are some things that you're not going to want to, experience, but you do because there's a reason why they're giving you that experience with them. And so he was wanting Dr. Rose to experience this with him because so he did not feel alone. He was losing his mother. So, it was another coping mechanism for him.
Well, and he kind of said, it's almost unfathomable.
Yeah.
Until you share it. Until, I'm going to videotape this because I can't believe this is happening. This is not real to me. And then when he was able to share it with Dan knew that he had to watch that in order to validate and say, okay, that this is real. She is dying and I'm your friend and I'm here. We're in this together.
Mm-hmm.
And so
where do we go from here?
Yeah, it's kind of a beautiful, I don't know,
disturbing
allegory
and
almost. Well, as to what the Therapeutic Alliance is this shared walk through life. And I think that's a wonderful.
Kind of different than what maybe Freud intended the therapist role to be.
Mm-hmm.
Originally.
Kind of the free association idea that we have where you're laying on the sofa just saying whatever comes to your mind. I mean, that seems pretty arcane in some ways.
Right.
I see.
But, Dr. Rose also talked about sort of transference, countertransference, and the importance of that. It's a lot of times, I know in some of the person-centered stuff that we've kind of covered, some of those are seen as negative elements, but in psychodynamic, it seemed like transference was, you're wanting that.
Right. It seems like it's not really either negative or positive. It's just kind of, it's there, and I guess the other things surrounding it, I guess, can make it negative or positive in a sense. But the actual mechanisms itself don't seem to necessarily be good or bad inherently. It just seems like that's just how we make sense of the world.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Do you guys see any way that you'll use this, or is anything really attractive about it to you in terms of future? I know for me, I like the foundational elements of it. As long as I've been alive and I've thought about psychology, this is what I think about. I think about the unconscious and I think about dreams. I don't know if we've touched on what he said about dreams, but I think there's a real application in terms of who comes into our room and what if they want to talk about dreams. Understanding this theory and how to relate with people from this point of view might be really helpful.
I like the example that he gave that, and this is applicable to myself. When you wake up in the morning or whatever, and you stumble, you trip and you hurt your toe or your big toe or whatever, he's like, you're not mad or you're not upset with the fact that it hurts. You're more upset that life is unpredictable, that you're not in control, that you're vulnerable to certain things in life, and it's really how you react to those, rather than as it's happening to you. It's how you react to it. So, And that's very important for me because I'm a very controlling person. So that was kind of, I mean, I kind of knew that in the back of my head, but the example he gave brought it
So
how
do you apply that to yourself?
Well, I feel like if I'm in control, then, life is good. Mm-hmm. But, just the other day, like my kids, this is very funny, but my kids kept leaving a stool out. I had to tell them 5 times because I kept tripping over it in the kitchen. And so the 5th time I was like, I just threw the stool over into the other room. I was like, it's not coming back in the kitchen. But it really wasn't about the stool and it wasn't about the kids. It was about, my need for control. And that week was very hectic for me. And so, I think that brought to the surface my vulnerability for that week and not feeling like I was in control of other aspects of my life. So
so you can kind of look at it as, in order to make sense of that, I guess, of that reality that you don't have control over, like, running into things, or just that things occur, and it's kind of like you have to make sense of it, and to make sense of it, you kind of say, well, my kids put that there, or that you try to just explain something, I guess, is what people are trying to do.
With a psychodynamic theory.
Right, and the unconscious plays, I guess, a large part of that. We consciously do it, but there's also the unconscious plays such a huge role in that too. In the end, what we're trying to do, it looks like, is just, we're trying to make sense of something. We're trying to make sense of that incident, of just the fact that you ran into something and you're experiencing pain.
It's an exhausting theory because you're constantly thinking, well, why did I do that? And why did that happen?
Right.
And why do they do that? I'm constantly thinking that. And it's very exhausting. I don't know that there's any end to it.
When I was listening to him process and watching how he processes so quickly, I thought, this is a theory for people a little ADHD, where their minds, where really they are able to process information very quickly, sensorial information, cognitive information, and really, you really have to be in the moment in order to catch all these micro expressions, everything that's going on. It's very dynamic.
I found it interesting because I was like, oh my gosh, I'm not going to be able to catch all of that when if I'm talking to a student or a client, I'm not going to be able to catch all that. And so I was kind of, thinking in my head, holy cow, what am I going to do? But he did say, you know what, if you're not going to catch it, it'll come back again.
Oh, the client always brings the problem back. Yeah,
so
that was good.
Eventually you will catch it.
Yeah, especially when you're just starting. Seiji, before we finish, you mentioned in class about you started a dream journal.
Oh, yeah. So, near the end of his talk to our class, Dr. Rose did mention, did get kind of into dreams. I think everybody found that part really interesting. Yeah. But he mentioned, was it he who mentioned it, or was it Dr. Baltimore? He mentioned that about keeping like a dream log, I guess. And really I think one of the big messages that Dr. Rose made was that when interpreting dreams and stuff, you have to just consider the actual individual. There's not like a thematic interpretation that you can apply to everybody, because everybody is an individual and the experiences that you have are different, and so the meanings of what's in your dreams go on to the individual. But I guess I was kind of inspired by just things that he said and the interpretation of his own dreams, and so I did start this week, writing down right when I wake up some of the fleeting memories that I have of what I just dreamt, and going back and looking at them when you're looking at them, when you're fully awake and can really analyze it and stuff. It is really interesting. You do really see how it does really apply, I guess, to what was on your mind or what's going on in your life.
So you feel like it is insightful.
It is. It does look like it is kind of like a glimpse into the unconscious. It's not just completely random thoughts in there. You know, it really is like your brain is processing and thinking while you're asleep, and it's just interesting.
I like that he said that it's not so much about the actual dream as to who we actually tell our dreams to.
I know, that made everybody kind of go, who am I talking to? Exactly. But that's a whole nother level, right? Mm-hmm. So before we kind of close up, is there anything burning or anybody that we didn't cover or something you guys are thinking? We're good?
I think we're all right.
All right, so thanks. This is us, cohorts, in Dr. Baltimore's theory class, just having a chat about psychodynamics. Thanks.